34. Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com and the Hook'em Horn Show. Might have a couple of people joining us later in the show, but we're coming back with you for Red River week. It feels like it's finally here. I don't know. For me, the bye week felt like it lasted for a really long time because this week is such a big week for college football. But also, like, last Saturday was so crazy that kind of made up for Texas having the bye week. You saw like just complete chaos around the SEC. You know, Tennessee falling to an unranked Arkansas team, Alabama obviously falling to an unranked Vanderbilt team. I think you're starting to see a leveling of the playing field in the SEC in a way that, you know, you would expect with the weekly grind that you get in this conference. And, you know, it really shows that I think Texas's back half of the schedule is a little bit more difficult than a lot of people would have originally expected. So, I mean, teams like Vanderbilt, like Kentucky, like Arkansas are looking a little tougher than they did a few weeks ago.
I said it on Twitter, and I'm going to say it on this podcast. I never want to hear another word about Texas losing to Kansas after number 1 Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. I don't want to hear another word. Keep going.
Those are two very different situations, but
yeah. Well, excuse me. They keep acting like we were this great team that lost. No, we were a bad team that lost to another bad team. Both times.
Yeah.
They were the number 1 team in the country and lost to a team where not one player on that team would have gotten an Alabama offer from Saban or Kalen DeBoer. Hell, they wouldn't have gotten a Washington offer. That's who you lost to. I don't want to hear it. Go ahead.
You in Washington, man.
Well, I'm just saying, he just came from Washington.
No, I know. I get it. They don't have Michael Penix Jr. anymore, so that's all. Exactly. That's all. I'll watch it anyway. So for this week though, I mean, you know, Tarik, I know you said it off air. It does feel like in a little bit of a sense that, you know, on a national scale, if Texas is able to win this game, I say if, I know they're 15-point favorite according to a couple of sports books now because of some of the injury news for OU this week. But I do think that, you know, there's still that world where you can just throw logic out the window because it's Red River. I mean, again, it's only been a handful of times that a team's been favored by double digits in this game. And you know, this year seems fitting that it's one of those because OU just is struggling so much on offense and has so many key injuries there. That said, if Texas wins this game cleanly, this is kind of the first talking point I wanted to bring up here for y'all. Like with Texas, you know, being the number 1 team in the nation right now, then being the odds-on favorite to win the SEC championship, second odds-on favorite to win the college football playoff national championship game, you know, 2-score favorites against OU. Do you think that, let's say Texas wins this game by 10 points, you know, they seal it late fourth quarter. Do you think that this does anything for Texas on the national stage? Obviously, a win in a rivalry game, Sarkisian getting a very important second win in 4 tries against OU will be critical, I think, for him. But, you know, just on the national stage, how do you think that would translate?
I don't think it would matter if they won 70-0 against this OU team that's, you know, now turning to a true freshman quarterback, doesn't have their top 5 wide receivers and things like that. It's just like, if you're favored by this much, and I can't remember even when Texas was not good and Oklahoma was really good, I don't remember us being 2 touchdown dogs to OU in recent memory. Maybe we were. But I don't think it's going to move the needle either way. It's just going to be something where you go in knowing that you're supposed to win and you should just take care of your job and do it. It'll be good for Sark's ego to, you know, be tied to the 2-2 and against OU, and next year you get to try to, you know, have a winning record against Brent Venables. Maybe, you know, if Michael Fasusi is at the game, maybe it tickles his fancy a little bit. But other than that, I don't see this moving us on the national stage. I think to do that, you'll have to win convincingly against Georgia next week.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened, as you touched on, Andrew, last week in college football, people came out of that, and, you know, Texas happy to be on the bye. People came out of that saying, there's a clear top two teams in the country. It's Texas and it's Ohio State. And I think just not struggling in this game keeps Texas on that tier. And I think it would be big, just for the program to say, hey, like this is a big game, regardless of what players are lining up for the Sooners. This is a rivalry game. This was far and away the most important game on the schedule the last 15 years. You can argue, a few different games this year, but I think it would be massive for the Longhorns to go in and handle business. I think too, in regard to the national, talking points for Oklahoma to have the 18 next to their name. Some fans, a lot of fans, are more casual, and so they're going to see an 18 and an Oklahoma, and they're not going to know the backstory of their top 5 wide receivers being out or Michael Hawkins making his second start. So I think Oklahoma beating Auburn in that sense was kind of big to give this game a little extra juice for the people that aren't paying attention. And I also think that this is kind of an off point, but the night slate with Ohio State and Oregon and Ole Miss LSU, I think people are going to be sitting down on their couch, around 6 p.m. to tune into these games. And if you flip on the channel and you see Texas dominating Oklahoma, they're going to be like, hey, that's a really good team. But, in regard to like the AP voters, I don't think it'll do much regardless of result, if they win. I don't think margin of victory does a whole lot, but to the perception of the casual fan, I think it could.
Though it would be interesting to see, like, let's say Ohio State blows out Oregon, which I expect to happen. If like they then put Ohio State number 1, move Texas back to number 2, and then like Texas beats Georgia, then they move them back to number 1. So Texas would be number 1. That'd have to be like the first time in history like that a team had been number 1 like 3 times in 5 weeks, but never number
consecutively.
1 consecutively.
Yeah, I mean, I credit to the AP voters because typically they're very like staunch in their ways. If you're number 1 and until you lose, we're not moving you off the point. But when Alabama beat Georgia, regardless of how it happened, that's a better win than in the big house against that current Michigan team. So I think Alabama was deservedly the number 1 team in the country. I like to look at it resume based. If Ohio State goes and beats Oregon on the road, I think they would deserve to be the number 1 team in the country too. And I wouldn't be surprised if they got there because the AP voters have shown some fluidity this year, which credit to them, not really just box score picking.
Yeah, I mean, with you having essentially the 2 super conferences now, I think we're going to start seeing a lot of this early season flip-flopping for like the top 3 or 4 spots in the AP poll, just because you're going to have so many elite teams and you're going to have so many opinion changes for the 12-team playoff that, I think you're going to have this discussion is going to be a thing for a while. Now, like as far as like I think the entire national landscape goes, I would agree that I think it's even more interesting if you look at it in this lens of if Oregon beats Ohio State at home, let's say by 2 scores. Like, when Oregon, what was that, 3 years ago, went into the shoe and beat Ohio State by like 14 points. Like, what happens if that happens again somehow? I don't think that's going to happen.
Without the best 2 players.
Yeah, true. I mean, but there's just a lot of really big games this weekend. You also have Ole Miss LSU, that night game that I think can really, like, is LSU a top 5 team in the SEC? Is Ole Miss still going to contend for an SEC title? I think that's a really big game. Also, it's at Death Valley. Crazy things can always happen for that. So,
is that game at night?
Yeah.
Oh, good luck.
Yeah. The one game that no one wants to play in the SEC on the road, no matter how good or bad LSU is. I don't remember who brought that up, but the last time that Texas, Tarik, I think that was you. The last time that Texas was actually a double-digit underdog or a 2-score underdog against OU was 2015. So,
oh boy.
Lord, I mean, without being like too superstitious about that, like, knock on wood, I don't think OU's running for over 300 yards on us this week.
Yeah, well, no, but that's because this game never makes any sense.
Exactly.
It didn't make sense last year either. I mean, that was by far Gabriel's best game in the Crimson and White, and he just looked like a different player that game. And we never saw that again. Like when we saw him against Kansas, against other people, it's like, this isn't the same team and the way they were running the ball and things like that. But I think this is the thing to take away from Texas. Even when all that was going on, you still basically should have won the game. You made that many mistakes and you were still in position to win. I don't think Quinn Ewers is going to make those kinds of mistakes this time around. I think he'll just let the game kind of come to him and things like that. But also knowing that OU's offense just isn't going to be able to go with you score for score if you start going that way. If you could barely score, they scored 21 against Auburn, and 7 of those came on a pick six. And Auburn's defense is nowhere near as good as Texas's defense. So you got that going for you. OU's offensive line is a mess. I mean, there's just, and also this is more important in 2015, OU felt like, they were unstoppable, and they kind of were. But Texas is coming in with a chip on their shoulder for last year, knowing, hey, that game, puts you in a position where maybe if you'd won that game, you could have had a better matchup in the playoff and maybe made the national championship. Because of that, you had the Washington matchup, where if you had either a Bama rematch or a Michigan matchup, that's a better matchup for what you do.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Tarik, I do think that there's a way this game goes for Texas that maybe it's like a 1A 1B scenario given what we know about OU as a team. I know that we're only more than a few weeks into the season, but we're 5 games into the season for both teams. You kind of had a rare occasion last week with both Texas and OU having the bye week. Neither team's played more than a couple of conference games. That said, OU's starting quarterback has started 2 games now. I think Michael Hawkins has obviously given them a shot in the arm on offense. His dual threat ability.
No, I think he's just started one. This is his second start. He started.
Oh,
first
right, yeah, the Tennessee game. He came in late. Yeah. So I mean, these are still teams obviously trying to figure out their identities to a certain extent. Like, I mean, I think Texas, you kind of know what they're trying to do on offense, but both teams have been really banged up at key positions. Yes, Texas is healthier at running back now, but you still have 3 running backs out on the injury report this week. If you're Texas, and for OU, obviously you guys mentioned it, the top 5, their 6 wideouts are out this week, including Deion Burks, their leading receiver, Nick Anderson, their best outside guy. I think the best guy left for OU, I guess we could have some conjecture there between Brennan Thompson and Jaquays Petaway, but Bauer Sharp, their tight end, I think is decent too, but those are really their 3 only legitimate options at this point. They're playing a lot of true freshmen now too. All of these kind of moving pieces for this game that you usually see that can, and the fact that just both teams spend so much time preparing for this game. You saw Brent Venables come out last year, really have a scripted game plan on defense that got Texas all out of sorts. They weren't able to pass the ball short. OU was really cleaning all that up, generated a turnover on what was at the second play of the game for Texas's offense. Quinn, you were throwing that interception early. And I guess long story short here, with the way that these teams have kind of how they've come to this point coming out of the bye week, I think there's only a handful of ways this game plays out for each team to win. I kind of put the markers at turnovers. Obviously, that's going to be a key part here. OU leads the SEC in turnover margin this season. They're also forcing about 2.5, 3 turnovers per game. They've been really good in that department. They've pretty much always been good at that under Brent Venables, but it's really coming to a head this season with the linebacker and defensive backfield really being their strengths on defense. And then, on offense, obviously, they rank dead last in the SEC, or at least bottom 3 in most significant offensive stat categories, especially when you're talking about passing the football. They really are not good at that this season. 3rd down, 4th down success rate on passing plays, they rank dead last in the SEC. I have a hard time seeing them getting much going in that regard, especially because Texas's secondary has been so good. If Texas scores, let's say 27 points, and either is equal or winning the turnover battle. I don't see Texas losing this game. I think that's kind of my marker here.
Yeah, I don't think OU can score 27 points. They didn't score 27 points against Houston, did they?
16, I believe.
They scored. If you can't score against Houston, you're not scoring that many against Texas. I don't care how crazy it is.
I'm not disagreeing with you there. I mean, and keep in mind, too, that a lot of OU's points have come on defense. Their defense either setting them up in plus territory or defensive touchdowns. That's what won them the Auburn game a couple of weeks ago.
Right, but Quinn Ewers isn't going to make those kinds of mistakes. He's been taking care of the ball really, really well. That last interception he threw, that was when you were starting to see, like, okay, that's when his oblique got hurt. You could see it from that throw, because it was like the guy was open and Quinn threw it to the right guy, but the throw was just weird. You're like, oh, okay, you got hurt. That's why. But yeah, I don't. So now I will say this: OU has a good defense, and they probably will get a turnover. And if it happens, it happens. That's fine. I mean,
yeah,
but I don't think Quinn. I don't think Quinn's going to do enough because here's the thing: even if, heaven forbid, let's say Quinn has a Carson Beck Alabama game against OU where he has multiple turnovers, they're not going to score enough off of those for it to matter, I have a feeling. Because that's the problem. You can get, if you're only getting like that much against Auburn, that much against Houston, I don't see you doing that against Texas.
I mean, this is the thing where it comes down to Red River. And if you remove the two logos on the helmet, then Texas should win this game handily. And so we're either going to talk about how it can get crazy because it's college football, it's Red River, and it's 50-50 down the middle, or we can break it down as these are two teams. One team is very, very good. The other team has a lot of flaws. And Andrew, you talked about, the path to victory. If you told Brent Venables he was going to score 24 points tonight, he would kiss you on the mouth and shake your hand. And like that if Oklahoma can score 24 points, I don't even think they're going to win if they can score 24, but I don't think they're getting anywhere near there. I think right now Vegas kind of has them at like 16.5. And I think the only path to victory, one is the turnovers that you talked about. OU's 13-5 in turnover margin this year, which is, one of the tops in the country. And two would be, just staying on the field and keeping the Texas offense on the sideline. Like the way the 2015 game went, if you guys remember, 3 and out for Oklahoma. Then Texas went down the field, scored a touchdown. Then Oklahoma fumbled the kickoff, and then Texas scored another touchdown, and they were up 14-0, kind of just like that. So if some college plays happen like that, which I'm not ruling out, then I think Oklahoma can definitely hang around. But if we're just talking about these two teams lining up against each other, I certainly have a lot of respect for the Oklahoma defense, but not enough to where I'm going to, really feel like Texas is in any trouble on Saturday.
I think that we've made some valid points about the way that this game could generically go, the different like high-level paths to victory for each team. I mean, obviously there's a million of ways you could spin this game. It can get weird a lot of the time, but more realistically, I would like to spend a little bit talking about how you guys feel like Texas can win or attack OU, where you feel like maybe the major advantages are, and then what scares you about OU and maybe what they can do to exploit Texas. And then we can talk about just generic players that we think are important for this game for Texas and OU, and then we can make our score predictions. What's up, Tarik?
I was going to say with, just besides not having their top 5 wide receivers, they have 2 of their starting defensive backs out too.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't, and regardless, I don't think there's any team in the country that has Texas's speed on offense. So you just need to find ways to get players the ball in space, and it'll kind of take care of itself. But also, because you know what you have left the rest of the season, I can see Sark wanting to kind of contain this game and, shorten it, making sure that he has a steady dose of the run game to shorten the game, because you're going to need everyone healthy next week against Georgia too. So
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, you got to win this game first. Cross that bridge once we get there against Georgia. It's a weekly grind in the SEC, but I do agree that if you can find a way to take advantage of your strengths, not have to go all out necessarily in the fourth quarter to get the win, that would be really nice. That said, one of the things about OU that I think Texas can exploit this weekend is kind of the inability of OU to get anything like okay, let me paraphrase this. I don't think OU is going to have many explosive plays in this game. Most of the reason why Oklahoma doesn't rank like in the bottom 10 in the FBS in offensive success rate this year is because of their explosive plays. They're middle of the pack in the SEC in offensive plays over 20 yards, but that's accounted for a lot of their offense this season when it has happened. Texas ranks, I think it's second or third in the SEC in explosive plays allowed on defense this season. So I think they've done a really good job in that regard. Obviously, you got experienced corners back there, at least really good corners with Jahdae Barron, Malik Muhammad that are doing a great job keeping the play in front of them. I think Michael Taft's been playing really good football, really physical football at safety this season. Highest defensive grade of his career, was writing about that earlier this week, just talking about, I know he had that stinger last week or 2 weeks ago against Mississippi State, but otherwise, outside of missing a tackle or two there, I think he's played pretty spotless football this season for Texas in pass defense and playing up in the box, helping with run support. Makuba's been a huge upgrade back there. I think the safety positions looked really good, and you're probably going to get Derek Williams back this weekend too. So last time he played a full game was against Michigan, had his first career pick. I think the safety position's looking really good there. I think they'll be well prepared. I think it'll be interesting, the linebacker matchups. Anthony Hill's had a lot put on his plate this year, to say the very least. I wonder how much OU is going to try to test him with the quarterback run game. David Benda, similar thing. And then, Texas' defensive line Vernon Broughton did a lot of the heavy lifting against Mississippi State. He kind of took over in the second half. I don't think I've ever seen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've ever seen Vernon Broughton look as good as he did in the second half against Mississippi State. That strip sack, forced fumble recovery, helping on that fourth down stop, consistently taking on double teams in the second half on money downs. I counted 3 where he two-gapped effectively and either got off the blocks or at least helped free someone else up. This is not things we were talking about with Vernon Broughton playing at the 3 tech or the 2I the last few years. So his development's really been astounding. He's, as of now, the second highest graded defensive tackle in the SEC after 6-7 weeks. So I think it's interesting there to see how all those match up, but I really do think that OU is going to struggle with explosive plays. And then from there, how is Texas able to defend the quarterback run game and really some of the wide splits? Because I think OU, they're going to try to use some of the speed that they have left at wide out. Maybe try some deep passes with Brennan Thompson. Try to get Jaquays Petaway something down the middle, working, between the numbers. He's got some speed, but Texas's defense should be able to help them win this game in a major way. Texas defense has been good this season. I think that the game plan against Mississippi State was really vanilla. They weren't trying to show a whole lot. So I think that's going to be a major advantage here for Texas. Where it scares me in that matchup is I don't think that Texas has faced a quarterback as good as Michael Hawkins yet. I know that the schedule hasn't been super difficult so far. Mississippi State's quarterback, Blake Shapen, injured out for the season, so they played a true freshman in the SEC opener in week 5 against Mississippi State. So speaking to that specific matchup, Shane, I did want to ask you, do you think that, the Michael Hawkins versus Texas defense matchup, do you think that that's going to be more of, does that scare you more with him using his legs, kind of with that quarterback ground game, or, maybe hitting explosives, deep passes over the top, him trying to make just Sooner magic happen, let's say?
I think the ground game concerns me a little more because that's more repeatable. And I think, not to switch the conversation, but if Oklahoma were to hit some explosives, I think the Texas offense can then match that. Whereas if Michael Hawkins is able to kind of do what Gerard Hurd did in 2015, and he'll break a 20, 25-yard run, but it's a lot of 8 to 10 yard, even between the tackle a little bit, just being smart with the football. I think that's where Texas could get hurt, kind of death by 1,000 cuts type of play. And you made a good point about kind of getting the ball in the hands of their speedsters. This secondary has been really good for Texas this season. A lot of talent, a lot of cohesion back there. Makuba has been just a huge add, is always around the football. So I don't expect Oklahoma to be able to throw it over the top, if at all. I know they're going to take their shots, and you mentioned, Brennan Thompson, we all know, very, very fast. They're going to take their shots. Maybe they'll connect on one or two, but I think if the Sooner offense has success, it's going to be kind of through the slow play, getting the ball in your speedster's hands, and one of those speedsters is Michael Hawkins. So I'd be more worried about the rushing attack than anything over the top.
I could concur with that. What gives me some good hope with that Michael Hawkins won't take too many rushes is Anthony Hill hurts people, and so does Leona Lafau. So, and also they can't really afford for Hawkins to get hurt because he's basically trying to save their season, and I don't think they want to. And it wouldn't shock me too much if, given how petty certain people are being in college football right now, if Hawkins got hurt, if Jackson Arnold just said, "Yeah, you're on your own. I'm not going back in." So, I'm just saying.
I've actually heard that, like, not to go completely, but he's only played in 4 games this year, so he could.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen plenty of players, or not a lot, but a number of players saying, "I'm sitting out. I'm getting in the transfer portal now." He hasn't, fully said that, but he could. So,
yeah, I mean, especially given the way that they kind of handled that situation, just kind of hanging him out to dry after that first half of that Tennessee game, that was kind of a mess for them on offense. I mean, I didn't mean to skip over the edge rusher so much for Texas here. I think Colin Simmons, Trey Moore is going to play an incredibly important role for really setting the edge in this game, containing the pocket, making sure that
Joel Klatt mentioned Colin Simmons by name on the Cowherd show. So,
oh wow,
Colin Simmons is making his presence felt. The national guys are noticing him.
Highest graded true freshman defender in all of college football so far this season. He's been impressive, man. I wrote up something, or not wrote up. I posted a stat the other day. I did a little dive, at least back throughout this century for the SEC. There's only been 3 true freshmen that had, I believe it was at least 4 sacks after their first 5 games. It was Derek Barnett did not make the list, but it was I believe Jadeveon Clowney, Myles Garrett, and Colin Simmons. Colin Simmons has 16, 15 quarterback pressures, something really impressive like that. I was looking at Myles Garrett, and he was 8 sacks and 36 QB pressures after his first 5 games. So something crazy like that. But anyway, Colin Simmons off to a tremendous start. Putting your name in that category of edge rushers and defensive ends in the SEC is really, really tremendous. I think that one other thing I wanted to mention about this kind of OU matchup, this is more special teams, but obviously it impacts the entire game with field position. OU ranks second in the nation this year in net starting field position. Brent Venables has done a defensive-minded coach. I guess paying attention to those details isn't crazy for special teams, but OU ranks second in the nation specifically in offensive starting field position. A lot of that thanks to their defense generating, I believe I counted 6 turnovers in plus territory. So, OU starting this season out about on average at the 38-yard, at their own 38-yard line on drives is really, really good. They only rank behind UNLV. And even defensive starting field position, they've been really good too. This just really quickly, does it concern y'all at all for the special teams battle this weekend, knowing that our punter, Michael Kern, is questionable?
I mean, some sites are saying out, but yeah, it's a concern. But hopefully we won't be punting much.
Yeah. I guess that's something that I'll be watching just in the micro parts of the game, but
Jeff Banks is the best, if not, or one of the top 5 special teams coaches in the country. I'm sure he'll construct a plan to, kind of keep him safe. Even going like maybe the max protection to make sure he gets those off. So,
well, and even then,
I don't. I mean, it's a concern. You can't say it's not, but is it a deadly one? I don't think so.
well, and Ian Ratliff, keep in mind, was competing with Michael Kern for the starting punter job in camp, and that was not that long ago. So I do think that if he is the one handling the punting duties on Saturday, he competed for this job. He gets his chance to show what he can do. So he's been right there before. Now the Texas offense against the OU defense. The matchups here are obvious. Tarik, you mentioned it at the top of the show. Texas is fully healthy in the receiving core this week. No DeAndre Moore. He was listed on the injury report for week 5. He's fully healthy. Obviously, a little bit before the bye week, had a really big game.
Had his best week as a Longhorn.
Yeah, over 100 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, really nice deep ball catch, touchdown, second half. That was right before the halftime.
Still sorry sad about him not getting that Michigan touchdown. That was such a nice one.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I forgot about that on the holdback for holding, right?
It's okay because now Cam Williams is projected to go in the first round, so he's redeemed himself. It's all working out.
Yeah. So, OU right now, their 2 starting corners right now rank. It is second to last and 8th from the bottom in the SEC in yards per cover snap. They are struggling this season in pass coverage, to say the least. I think, you mentioned Gentry Williams, I believe, is out. Kendall Dolby, their starting cheetah, kind of their starting nickel. They call it the cheetah position, but Dolby out for the season with I believe an ankle injury. So those are 2 huge injuries. Now, OU does get back Deshaun McCullough this weekend. If y'all remember that name, he's been injured. He should be making his debut this weekend. So that's something that could boost that OU defense. That said, you got to attack him on the outside. And getting Quinn Ewers back is going to be a huge help for this game. I don't see why you would really try to test OU a ton across the middle or really try to test their safeties a whole lot. I think obviously you will at some point, but I think the strength of their defense it's either the linebacker or the safety position. Trying to run up the middle this game with guys like Stutzman, Kip Lewis is playing really well this year for them, kind of coming into his own. I don't think you really try to test them up the middle as much, not to mention Robert Spears-Jennings. He's really been helping in their run fits too in box support and safety. So I guess what I'm saying is try to stay away from the safeties as much as possible in the pass game. Make sure that you're effectively communicating, blocking Stutzman, kind of hitting those gaps because, man, he's a thumper, good run stopper, as we all know. And then, try to attack their corners on the outside. I'd like to see some stuff. God, it's so hard to pick what you want to see from this receiving core. It's just so deep and talented. But, some Isaiah Bond on the outside, maybe get some DeAndre Moore working the short passing game out to the flat, something like that, working between the numbers. We haven't really seen a whole lot of him doing that. Gunnar Helm, obviously, you can get him doing that this year, depending on what the box setup looks like. But outside of that, attack the outside. Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond, Ryan Wingo, get those guys involved. How do y'all feel kind of about the Texas offense versus the OU defense? Because obviously that's, the Sarkisian offense versus the Venables defense is where it's really coming down to.
Yeah, well, you're going to be playing in 92 in a pretty warm game at the Cotton Bowl too. So
yeah, you are.
Use some tempo, tire them out, run a lot of plays. And also, I think this is a key point. Spread them out. Don't let Stutzman just play in the box. I think that you got what Sark has to do, and I'm sure he will do, is okay. I know what you want to do. I'm going to make you do what you don't want to do. So that's kind of the way to do that. I think you need to have Jaden Blue doing some patterns in the middle where he can take Stutzman in coverage and things like that, because Stutzman is an old school linebacker. He'll make all the tackles, he'll clean everything up, he'll always take the right reads, but he's not going to be running with people down the sideline. He's not Jalen Smith when he was at Notre Dame. So
I mean, I think it's kind of strength on weakness with both things in regard to like OU defends the run really well. And if there's one thing about this Texas team that you could ask for a little more, it's the rushing attack hasn't always been there. Obviously, with CJ Baxter, Christian Clark, and now Belton Gardner out, I mean, you got to give him a little bit of a break. We saw Blue put it on the ground a couple times last week, but I think it could be tough sledding running the football. So, Andrew, like you were saying, getting it to the bevy of talented wide receivers you have on the outside is going to be your best way to attack this defense, especially with the safeties in the middle. Billy Bowman, he had a big pick last year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he made another big play this year. So kind of staying away from those guys in the middle would be how I would attack it. And I also think, somewhat of the unfortunate part here is I do completely trust Quinn. He's a completely different player than he was a year ago in this game, and we saw how he ended the game after the two bad drives to start. But because Texas is probably going to be putting in the air a lot, I do think that's where Oklahoma can take advantage and maybe try to jump some routes, undercut some balls, score with that defense. Because I think Brent Venables probably knows that if his defense either has to score or, like you mentioned, Andrew, a lot of turnovers in plus territory. So I'd expect a pretty aggressive defense on the outside, and that's where you can use those double moves to go over the top. But especially early on in the game, I'm going to be clenching my fist a little when Quinn's making those, sideline to sideline throws.
Yeah, like you were saying, that kind of got him in trouble at times last season in this game. Yeah, so I think it's interesting, Tarik. This is the last thing I really want to mention for this matchup. I posted something on the site or on our Twitter page earlier this week. I've done a lot of data digging for this game and kind of just digging through film too. But, Texas likes to run a lot of 12 personnel. They've done that a lot this season. Try to open up more stuff in the ground game, get more protection for the quarterback if needed. But, Texas leads the SEC right now in rush yards per game, second in yards per carry, in two tight end sets, 21 personnel. But OU is the third best rush defense against yards per carry against 21 personnel. And a lot of that is that reason that, you load up guys like Spears, Jennings, Lewis, Stutzman in the box. That's a really tough matchup for a lot of offenses. I do think, Tarik, yes, looking at the numbers too, you mentioned it. I mentioned the wide splits earlier against OU's defense. That's probably going to be a good way to attack them in this game. OU ranks second from the bottom, actually, in the SEC. This one kind of surprised me when they face 21 personnel in the passing game. I think kind of Shane, to what you were mentioning about using different motion, pre-snap, getting the running backs involved, kind of doing with like Trey Wisner and maybe Jaden Blue, like Texas used to do with Keelan Robinson. Get these guys motioned out, figure out different ways to use them. Maybe we see more with Amari Niblack, Juan Davis. There's a lot that you can do in this game for Sarkisian to really spread OU out and give yourself more advantageous matchups. You also got the different types of running backs to be able to do that. Maybe give Niblett some looks out of the backfield, man. I think that could be a pretty fun way to get him involved in this game. Get him to test some of the speed that OU, I think, lacks on the outside a little bit. So we'll see. There's a lot of ways that we can slice and dice this, but I feel better than I did maybe a few days ago about this Texas offense versus OU defense matchup, especially knowing that Quinn Ewers has been pretty much at 100% in practice this week, from what I've heard, various reports, things like that. That he's, I believe I heard, for about the last 8 or 9 days in practice, been looking pretty good with the first team offense. So that's good to hear. I think it's prediction time. Is there anything else y'all wanted to throw out there before we give our score predictions and that stuff?
Great day of college football. You only get these every so often. And also, I would say embrace and enjoy the 2:30 kick. I haven't had one in a while against Oklahoma. So
that is true. First time since, I think, 2017. So
it'll be nice. It'll be nice for me to drive out there for 3 hours, maybe take a nap, and then go to the game.
Yeah.
So
among us three, and I'll throw Mark into it. Mark actually had the closest score prediction for the Mississippi State game. He had 34-17. So After that, Shane, you were second closest. I was furthest off because I had us winning 52-10. So, but okay. Yeah, Shane, you go first for score prediction.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 31-16 Texas. I think that Oklahoma will come up with a turnover, and I think they're gonna put some pressure on the Horns early. But in the end, I think the Texas offense will be too much, and Michael Hawkins down all of those skill players in only a second start. Probably going to cough it up once or twice. And Oklahoma really has no margin for error if they want to win this game. So I think Hawkins will do some impressive things. Maybe beat the defense deep once, but for the most part, going into the second half, I think Texas should have it handled.
45-17.
All right.
I think Texas puts it away, and I think we'll see some Arch Manning in there, and I think he'll score too.
Do you think Texas gets to 45 just purely dominating the Oklahoma defense, or are you expecting some?
I'm expecting more offensive woes for OU, putting them in bad spots.
Okay,
if they're not making Texas drive the ball like 70 yards, if you're starting at like the 45 all the time, Texas is gonna score a lot.
Yeah.
So it's just, and the other thing is, if Texas goes up early, it's not going to be like last year where there's a chance you can come back. That's gonna break them. With Auburn, there was always that chance because you just kept it so close the entire game, and you just got that play when you needed to. But Texas can just put it down and hold you down too. So, because I mean, in some ways, OU is kind of a slightly updated version of Michigan, and that I think their quarterback can actually throw. So that helps. But although we played the guy who could throw, so that's not neither here nor there. But I don't think the thing that's getting overlooked is how good Texas's offensive line is. So while I think OU is going to get some pressure because they have a good defense, if Grant and Graham were not destroying that offensive line, I don't think this team is either. So
for OU, it'd be the edge rushers. I mean, if they manage to get them involved with some different stunts from the outside,
they're not going to be doing. They're not going to move Banks and Williams that way. For one thing, it's so. I keep go back and watching, and sometimes I've just gone back and watched. Cam Williams. He is so long.
Yeah.
You'll see I was like, man, even good edge rushers are just like, okay, I'm tired. I'm just going to go this way instead.
I think I would probably worry a little bit more about some of like the linebacker stunts and safety blitz more so than I would like R. Mason Thomas or Ethan Downs getting pressure. So I would agree, but I do still think they could find different ways to get pressure on the quarterback. Or Spears Jennings, maybe he's been really good as a pass rusher. He's got, I think, 2-3 sacks already this season as a safety. It's been impressive. Okay. I'm going 34-23. I'm going somewhere in the middle between y'all. I think that Texas does get like a game's like I think they put it away late with like a field goal or something, or at least to get a field goal lead. I just, I could see, I think Texas probably has 1 or 2 turnovers in this game, and that's enough to keep it close. Maybe, again, playing that field position. But I think that Texas finds enough, learns from their mistakes, that they're able to put it away, maybe about middle of the fourth, late in the fourth. Okay, last thing before we jump off here, I want to get y'all's over-under picks on this, and then we can get going. So Prize Picks has Quinn Ewers at a touchdown and a half for passing touchdowns for the over-under, and then Michael Hawkins at 31.5 rush yards for the over-under. Do y'all think it's over, or do y'all think they hit the over the under on those stat categories?
I'll take over on both.
I would go over on both as well.
I could see Michael Hawkins just breaking one run for 31 yards.
Yeah, the only thing is in college the sacks kind of get QB rushing yards. So I mean, the Oklahoma offensive line has been bad, so that's something that's a
Exactly.
little bit of a trap line because you look at Michael Hawkins 31 yards, you're like, yeah, he's going to pick up more than that, but then you take away the sack yardage. I'll still go over on both, but I think it'll be closer than we think.
Texas had, what was it, 5-6 sacks against Mississippi State, against a dual threat quarterback, true freshman there. I think this might be a little different, but Texas pass rush seems to be figuring it out at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
I also think our edge rushers are fast enough to the point where it's not like Hawkins' speed is still going to be a weapon, but it's not going to be as much as it would have been like last year, 2 years ago. Like we didn't have Colin Simmons and Trey Moore last year. We had a freshman Anthony Hill that they used as a hybrid edge rusher, and that was really it. And so, I mean, Barron Sorrell's a good edge rusher, but he's not like insanely fast. So anyway. And Ethan Burke's really long, so it's kind of hard to get away from once he gets that edge. I'm going to go under for Michael Hawkins because I actually took the over on a bet earlier this year for Jackson Arnold for rushing yards against Tennessee because I was thinking that they had to use his legs if they had any chance of beating him, and then he just got toasted. But I could see that going either way. I'll take the under on that, and I just don't see how Quinn gets under a touchdown and a half for passing touchdowns in this game. Mind you, last time he came back from an injury in Red River 2022, over 300 total yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 1 interception. So he's been really good when he comes back from injury. Which game? Do y'all remember which game it was he came back from injury last year?
Yes, TCU.
Yeah, it was TCU.
TCU.
Right after the undefeated Malik Murphy almost cost us the Kansas State game.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a really good start, and then it kind of fell off. Because I thought Quinn was pretty good in that TCU game. He had a few slip-ups here and there, but I thought the receivers didn't give him much help in the second half, except for obviously Adonai Mitchell.
Yeah.
His you could see just how much better his decision-making was than Malik Murphy's, but also, like, Jordan Whittington in that game just showed you he is a dog.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, wow. Hey, Mark, we've already done score predictions, but what's up?
And
I got to get going here, so.
Yeah, I'll stick on with you, Mark, for a little bit. But I did want to say, I was saying earlier, Mark, you actually won the score prediction battle before the bye week. You had the closest score prediction for the Mississippi State game. So
absolutely.
Your first mark up on the scoreboard for that. I guess I can get your prediction on this here, Mark. Before we jump off, I'll get your score prediction here at the end. Shane, I know you had to get going at some point here soon too, but so I was going around for prize picks. We got Michael Hawkins at over under for rush yards at 31.5, and then Quinn Ewers at passing touchdowns, the over under at 1.5. Would you take over under for those lines?
I would take over. Hawkins is going to need to run for them to win. They haven't had any production from the running back position, and major production in any of their games. He gave them a shot in the arm down in Auburn that they didn't have with Jackson Arnold. The offense was stagnant, and in order for those guys to win this game, Hawkins is going to have to be dynamic through the air and on the ground. He's going to have to make some plays with his feet. Texas is going to have to stay disciplined in their rush lanes and not get too far upfield and give him those lanes up underneath to get free. Mike is a dynamic athlete. He's been that way for a while. He was like that at Allen. He was like that at Frisco Emerson. It's the reason he was a 4-star recruit. I figured he would get a chance early. I didn't think Jackson Arnold would struggle this much. I know I'm giving a lot of information real quick, but I say he rushes for about 75 yards, and Ewers easily has 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, you went with the same way pretty much everyone else did. I was saying just because of the sack yards counting against quarterbacks in college that I actually took an over under for Jackson Arnold for rush yards against Tennessee a few weeks ago, and that really burned me because of the sack yards and how bad OU's offensive line is. So I actually took the under on Hawkins, but yeah, I mean he had about 70 rush yards and 1 touchdown against Auburn a few weeks ago. So that kind of dynamic dual threat ability is going to play a role in this game because if not, OU is going to be, their offense is going to be screwed. So,
yeah.
Okay. I just think in general, you know, Mark, for this game, if I can, I'm going to kind of take this back a little bit, but you know, I think
I'm
for
gonna
this
sign off,
game,
guys. Hook 'em.
all right,
Let's get it
yeah,
done.
I gotta
all
go
right,
too. See
Shane,
ya.
talk to you later, Tarik. So, so yeah, Mark, kind of what we were talking about earlier in the video, and just in general, like there's probably a defined set of pathways to a Texas win in this game. I think for one, I kind of made the mark of if Texas wins or is even in the turnover margin for this game, and they're able to score, I said 27 points, just because that gets you over that 3 score mark, and I think that puts you in a territory where if you're not handing the ball to OU in plus territory that much, that their offense probably won't be able to manage that much. I don't know kind of how you feel about like the paths to victory in this game, you know, the different ways, just given all the injuries for OU, the lack of production and efficiency from their offense being able to move the chains or lack thereof, and the fact that their defense has been so good, and you know the way that they've won as many games as they have is really because they've been able to win turnover battles and been so good on defense.
That's where I was going. I think their defense is going to be their offense. Texas cannot turn the ball over, especially deep in their own territory. Billy Bowman Jr. is an All-American type player for a reason. He's probably going to be a high draft pick in that secondary. Stutzman is a stud at linebacker. Those are the really two key guys. This is a depleted OU lineup. I mean, they're not going to have the reserves, in the tank, on paper. Now, you never know. You kind of got to throw the records and everything out because it's such a heated rivalry. But I think that Texas cannot play down to the level of their opponent in this one. I think that, if you give that opportunistic defense any life, they're going to take it. And I think that's what they're hanging their hat on this week is they know that they're going to be underwhelmed and outmanned offensively going against the Texas defense. Michael Hawkins coming into a big environment in his biggest game so far. Those are the things that they're going to do. But I think if you give this defense any turnovers and any momentum, that spells a disaster for Texas, especially early. You want to set the tone early. I think you come out, you hit them in the mouth, run the ball, get some quick game going. Let Quinn get heated up a little bit, get warm, get his feet back up underneath him. It's been a few weeks since he's been, in the fire. But I think that Texas knows this, and this is one of those games. This is one of those I gotcha games or a trap game that if you want to call it that they can't let their guard down, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you had that. I was saying this earlier in the show today. Texas had turnover on what was it, the second play on offense last year when Ewers threw that interception, and then you had 2 more turnovers after that. And Texas almost overcame that, but
Right.
Dylan Gabriel's dual threat ability ended up kind of stealing that game back for OU. I agree. I think that the way that this game shapes will kind of be set how Texas is able to, really get things going on offense from the very start of this game. Tarik had mentioned it earlier. This is supposed to be a really hot game on Saturday afternoon at the Cotton Bowl. I mean, I know it's mid-October, but the heat hasn't let off here. It's supposed to be low to mid-90s.
Right.
And so, I mean, if you can get OU's defense tired early, that will be a big help, because also for Texas, if OU, like you said, if OU is able to control some of the clock, that's what they're going to be looking to do, is keep Quinn Ewers off the field as much as possible. If they can control the clock early, that puts Texas in a tough spot. Because if you end up having a situation where you're down, let's say 7 points, and it's a low scoring game entering the locker room at halftime, you're kind of unsure of the offense, how everything's going. That's exactly where OU wants to be in this game. That's their most realistic path to victory here.
Yeah.
That said, I do think that, and this is actually something I hadn't really thought about before, but the way that OU is able to run the ball with the quarterback, if they can really open things up against Texas's defense and kind of get them off balance like Texas's defense was before the bye week against Mississippi State, I do think OU has a few more weapons than Mississippi State did.
Mm-hmm.
Better running backs. Taylor Tatum is good for this game. I know he's missed a little bit of time due to injury. He's a good back, and they can get him involved in different ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's definitely something that if Texas doesn't, in this scenario where Texas isn't able to, get going early on offense, yeah, you're right. But that said, Quinn has looked really good in the offense this year outside of a couple of plays here or there. And I think the oblique strain, kind of had an impact on his one interception against UTSA because he looked really good otherwise.
Mhm.
And to be fair too, a lot of what's given Quinn trouble at different times has either been confusing checkdowns for him or like just really good safety play, which is where I mentioned this earlier in the video. I think that Texas has to avoid throwing it like OU's safeties. Like, I mean, eventually you're going to test them at some point, but like, don't try to consistently go like middle of the field working between the numbers because I think Texas's strength here is going to be spreading OU's defense out, hitting them on the outside. Because if you try to beat them up the middle, that's where I feel like you're going to kind of get muddied up in this game. If you try to beat like Spears, Jennings, like Stutzman, Lewis, I mean, he won OU their first ever SEC game with a game-winning interception late against Auburn. I guess Auburn kind of lost that game. I figured more than OU won that, but man, OU's defense has been a game changer for them this year, and Lewis really coming into his own. So, yeah, I mean that getting ahead early is going to be a huge thing here. It's kind of speaking to Texas's defense versus OU's offense here. Another thing that I didn't talk about a ton earlier, just because there's so many different talking points always for Red River. Do you think that Texas's defense kind of continues to see success in the pass rush the way that they did? I don't know against, what did they have? 5 or 6 sacks against Mississippi State? That might be a little unreal. Like, obviously, OU's offensive line isn't good. Mississippi State's offensive line is probably better than OU's, but I think Michael Hawkins is the best quarterback Texas has faced so far this season. That might not be setting a high bar, and Texas is going to see some really good quarterbacks in the SEC in late October and then November with the way Connor Wegman's looking, Pavia, the way he looked against Alabama, his dual threat ability. Obviously, Carson Beck's still a really good quarterback at Georgia.
Right.
That said, I think that Texas, you got Colin Simmons, you got Trey Moore, 2 guys that you didn't have last year when Dillon Gabriel ran amok against you. I know the interior of the defensive line isn't as good, but, Vernon Broughton still is really coming into his own since that Mississippi State game in that second half. He's been playing really well in general this year. Alfred Collins, I think I was expecting a little bit more from him this year just in terms of his impact on the games, but he's still been pretty good. He's turned into a consistently solid defensive tackle, which is still kind of what Texas needs here. But yeah, my question is like the pass rush, how much of an impact on this game do you think it has? And do you think Texas still sees that success that they've seen lately?
I think it's been a group effort. No one guy's really just taking over the load. Like, that guy's going to show up. I've been on here several times and I've been kind of riding that Colin Simmons wave that I think that this is a game that he comes out and he establishes himself as that guy, as a freshman in the SEC. Broughton and I think he's played well. Those guys are, against the run is where you really got to look what these guys' impact comes in. That's the key. I thought Mississippi State tried to really run the ball down Texas's throat, and they didn't have a lot of success. The play action game led to them getting some, open looks in the middle of the field and kind of kept Texas off balance. I think if I'm OU, if I'm calling the plays, that's what I want to do is try to keep Texas off balance, try to keep them guessing. I want them to not really just, pin their ears back and come full throttle in the rush, some screen game. And this is where, you talked about Taylor Tatum. He could be an X factor. He's a pretty good receiver out of the backfield. He's a guy that, he's been a little banged up, and this could be his coming out party. This is not a game that we can just, chalk up to, hey, we're going to put up 50 going away. There's going to be some momentum. There's going to be some, the play calling is going to be important. You're speaking about dual threat quarterbacks. This is a little bit off subject, but I thought that the reason Vanderbilt really beat Alabama was the play calling. They called a perfect game, like the perfect storm. The play calling was excellent. And I thought, man, my whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, Texas needs to be looking at this. This is what they're going to be seeing when it comes down to Vanderbilt. This is the key right here. And if you look at what they want to do with Mike Hawkins, it's going to be similar to that. They're going to zone read, pick and poke, try to see it, hit the zone read pass, try to mix them up because you're going to have to keep those guys from just pinning their ears back and coming full throttle on the rush. But I think the secondary is going to be key as well. Don't give up the big play, but staying in those pass rush lanes is going to be key to this game. Don't get too far upfield. You want to funnel Mike back into the middle where you got linebackers. They're going to probably spy him with Anthony Hill. I can expect him to have a big game as well. I think that Jahdae Barron is going to be a guy that factors in this game as well as a playmaker on the defensive side.
Yeah, I'd mentioned earlier in the video today, I do think that Barron and Muhammad's ability and the safeties, Makuba, Taff, the way that they've played really well in pass defense and really done a good job limiting explosives this year, keeping the play in front of them has been huge. And yeah, I mean, OU hasn't been like a crazy good explosive play team this year, but a lot of the offensive success they have found this season has largely been due to those explosive plays. So I think you're right that that's going to be a huge key.
I think sure tackling, gang tackling, you can't miss tackles on these guys, especially with Mike when he gets in the open field. You can't afford to miss tackles here and turn a 15-yard gain into a 30-yard gain. We want to close the momentum down, gang tackle them, take the right angles from the safety position. I think those are the things that you have to do in order to be the keys to success this week. And just channeling the emotions. Listen, whoever's penalized the least amount is going to win this game for sure as well. And then you never know what the special teams aspect of this will come out. There's all kind of variables that go into this. But, on the flip side, going back to Quinn Ewers, I think, you can't get too greedy with the big play. Texas wants to hit the big play. And you mentioned, hitting them in the middle with the safeties. Let's not get too greedy. Take our time, methodically work it. If the shot's there, take it. But don't just try to throw in the double and triple covers and just obviously make those kind of key mistakes. So I think sometimes, we can get very, very happy with that, trying to make the big play, the splash play. Let's take it slow, get in there. If it's there, take it. But, on the flip side, you want to be methodical about it and really, I think this is where the offensive line comes in key and lay on those guys. You mentioned the heat, get out early. This is one of those games where you may see Texas, if they win the toss, take the ball first.
Yeah, that's a fair point. All right. So, you had mentioned a moment ago saying, with the Taylor Tatum part that, he could be someone that factors into this game for OU in a big way for their offense. On the Texas side of the equation, when you're looking at the way this game goes and who could kind of be some of the difference makers, you mentioned Jahdae Barron, someone that has been a playmaker. And I don't really want to call him a playmaker in the sense that like that's all he does for the defense, because I think his primary role here is just like he's such an intelligent football player and he's such a consistent like one-on-one cover guy that like probably still are. I don't know who our best cover DB is at this point. It might be Muhammad. It might be Barron. They're both really, really good. Holmes has been really good this year. I don't think he's quite on the level as them, but Holmes is probably the fastest of the bunch. That's for sure. I mean, he's been really good defending the deep ball this year. I think that's been overlooked a little bit. But anyway, naming one or two, I kind of got off subject there. One or two guys that, when you look at this game for Texas, mine's Quinn Ewers, just because if Quinn Ewers has a big game, I think Texas could rush for 3 yards a carry. That's not ideal, but I think if, you're looking at this, Quinn Ewers has, 250 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. I have a hard time seeing Texas losing this game almost no matter what. So, when you look at it, who are some of those key guys for Texas where you say, hey, if they are playing well in this game, Texas is probably going to win?
I think you hit it on the head with Barron just because he's do it all. He's versatile. He can play corner. He can play safety. He can play in the nickel. He can come off the edge in a cat corner blitz. As far as best cover guys, I have to go with Malik Muhammad. I just think I don't think he's been tested as much. If you really look at the film and go back and look, they don't throw at this guy very much, and there's a reason they don't. He's a ball hog. His length. He's fundamentally sound and one of those technical guys at the cornerback position. But there's a guy that I really want to see emerge, and that's Gunnar Helm. I think he's kind of been lost in the sauce with all of the hoopla with the wide receivers. But if you look at a couple games back, he had a pretty big game. And I think he's a guy that's a safety blanket, and Quinn Ewers seems to use him a lot. especially down in the red zone. I think that Gunnar Helm's a guy that's going to be, sneaky, kind of in that red zone area that, he floats, through the middle and hits those seams very well. And I don't think he gets enough credit for being a pretty good guy run after the catch. But I think the key is going to be in the trenches. There's no reason that Texas shouldn't control this game up front. I agree with you wholeheartedly. If Quinn has 2 touchdowns and over 200 yards, 250, very efficient, we're talking like 20 or 27 or something like that, then I think that there's no reason that Texas shouldn't win this game going away. But I think you have to have some balance in the run game as well. But I agree with you, Quinn. I think Quinn is probably the most important X factor because of the time he's been off, and I think his ability in that offense to make them multiple. I think when they first started the first game, with Arch, they had to kind of feel their way into it. Quinn has a full range of the offense, and I think he's not limited with that. I think Arch is a little bit more athletic than people give him credit for. And you could basically say he's a little bit more athletic than Quinn is if you really just want to talk about it like that. But controlling the trenches, controlling the time of possession is going to be key. But as far as those players, I think defensively. Barron, I think Anthony Hill's due for a big game. We're talking about I would say a double-digit tackle game because he's going to be the guy that's going to probably spy Mike Hawkins. He's fast enough, he's agile enough, and he could cover a lot of ground and close some of those angles down on Mike. When he's trying to break in and out of the pocket, he's probably going to be the guy that's spying him. So you can look for a double-digit tackle effort out of Anthony Hill Jr. this week.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot on Anthony Hill's plate, I think. There has all season. Moving him inside or moving him to middle backer it was interesting to me to see them play 2 linebackers in the box pretty much all first half against Mississippi State. I'm sure you noticed that watching the game that David Benda and Anthony Hill had a lot to deal with against that Mississippi State dual threat quarterback. How much Mississippi State was able to honestly just move the ball on the ground in the first half. I think that Texas has been saving a lot of their kind of more interesting twists, stunts, different coverage looks, schemes for this bigger run for, October coming out of the bye than they had with that vanilla defense.
You mentioned Bender. He's the unsung hero that's been playing well that maybe people aren't talking about a lot. He's been consistent. And that's one thing you can say about him. He's been consistent. He's right there when it comes to being Mr. Consistent on that defense, and he's not, getting all of the press clippings, if you want to call it that.
You mentioned that, and we might have said this before on the show, but I always, at this point, it's just like almost a meme reference for us. But about a year and a half ago, we had spent about 30 minutes of an entire show unintentionally talking about David Benda and his progress and development, where we felt like he was starting to turn a corner. And ever since we've turned now. Yeah, no, it has been. And so, we definitely have given him a lot of shout outs. Same thing with Jahdae Barron. I've been a huge fan of his. Really since the get go a few years ago. So you mentioned the thing with Malik. That piqued my interest in a sense because I actually had done a little bit of an article, like a partial focus for him for an article a few weeks ago talking about, and Jahdae, it wasn't just Malik, but when I look at the numbers, Malik Muhammad on PFF, it says he's gotten 16 targets this season, which is kind of hard to believe. Giving up 5 receptions. And then I was kind of thinking, because I saw he gave up, you see the number, he's given up 36 receiving yards, and then it kind of hits you like, oh, people are just, he's long physical corner, sticks with guys, quick hits downfield. Yeah. When you look for anything over 5 air yards for his targets, targeted 8 times, no completions. The only guy in the SEC, I guess you would put that 6 to 100 yards, air yards, only cornerback in the SEC that hasn't given up a single completion that's been targeted over 5 times in that regard. That's that ability to just lock down on guys no matter what. Yeah. I don't know. I'm a stat nerd, so that sort of stuff really sticks out to me. But that definitely, you can see it on film. You can see it on the stat sheet. He's a really, really, really good cover corner and just a really good football player.
Solid, man. I had a chance to see him extensively when he was at South Oak Cliff, and he was the same type of player. Now he's just got the physicalness when his body is caught up to his mind and his his feet and his ability that he already had. You know, Malik's one of those guys that's probably going to be a first round pick coming up. Whenever he's draft eligible. And like you said, I mean, the film backs up the stats. They're just not going at him. When they do, he stands up. And that's the reason that he's in that upper echelon of when you talk about top cornerbacks in the SEC, probably in the country. It's a big reason the defense has played so well. They haven't been fully tested. I think this is going to be a big test for them. You can't look past OU because it's a rivalry. It's an SEC game. Everything's on the table. The bullseyes on the Longhorns back, being the number one team in the country, coming into the SEC. You can remember we talked about this back when we first started doing the shows going into the fall. A lot of people don't like the Texas in the SEC and that Texas is a favorite and, Texas is getting all of this love. It's a lot of people that are frowning on that just because Texas is Texas. Now the target's on their back, with Alabama going down, Georgia going down, it's pressure in the sense that they have to continue to keep this ball rolling. And I think that Coach Sark has really done a great job of kind of downplaying that. If you listen to his press conference, he hardly talks about we're number one, we're this, we're that. It's kind of business as usual. It's kind of like he knows something that you don't know. And it's kind of a low-key type of thing. And that's the way that you have to go and take that championship mentality into these games. Because, we talked about it in the chat, I think, this week. This is a pretty, schedule that they have remaining, including OU. This is the first few tests that you have to have. You know what I'm saying? You have to have that mindset. So one week at a time. You got Georgia, you got Kentucky, Vandy's playing well, Florida's getting confidence. You still got A&M lurking. So if the Longhorns, we're kind of forecasting that in the future. If they can run this table, they deserve to be number one.
Yeah, without a doubt, too. I mean, you got to figure that, teams like Vanderbilt, like Arkansas, Florida with their two quarterbacks right now, Kentucky, all these unranked teams, because A&M is going to be A&M looks like they're playing really well right now. And, you got to go down into College Station. That obviously looks like an incredibly difficult game at this point. But a lot of these games, it's going to test you, like you're saying, and you're going to have to prove that, I think Texas could have 2 losses this season and still get into the playoff. But, if you want that number one spot, you want that bye, and you want to make the SEC championship game, you probably can't lose more than one more of these games. So
I think from top to bottom, this is probably the most consistent year that the SEC has been having consistent winning. It's not just Alabama, Georgia,
like more
Missouri.
parity kind of.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's more teams that are kind of in that mid bubble or on the bubble of just they could have one loss instead of the 2 that they have based on where they at playing home or away. That matters in the SEC. And I think that these teams are starting to peak. And we're going to see the real test is going to really start to come. In these next few weeks for Texas, if everything comes clean out of OU, staying healthy is a big, big thing. You got to keep these guys healthy for this run because it's going to be a gauntlet.
Completely agree. Yeah, I mean, I don't see a single game remaining on Texas's schedule. I think the one I would feel best about is the Florida game, just because. Yeah. Anyway, without diving into future games,
they're not consistent.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
That said, I said this earlier in the video, and I do think it's interesting that this is probably, just as a Texas fan, probably the least nervous I've been about, like, leading up to Red River, covering Red River, whatever, just as a fan. Like, this is probably the least nervous I've ever been. Not to jinx anything, but, like, Texas does have the advantage in multiple areas, and I think this is the biggest matchup discrepancy that we've seen. And the fact that Deion Burks, their leading receiver, is out for this game, Nick Anderson being out, they really are limited with weapons on offense. So,
absolutely.
I gave my score prediction as 34-23, Texas winning. I was kind of in the middle of the pack because Tarik was 45-17. He's usually the most optimistic with the score predictions. Sure. And then Shane gave, I think it was 31-16. So actually, I was the least. Actually, never mind. I was the least most conservative on that. So Yeah, anyway, I didn't have us quite covering, but I do think that Texas gets a 2-score win. I just think there's going to be some turnovers. This game always gets muddied up. But I think Texas is a 2-score favorite for a reason. I think they could win by double digits.
I want to say maybe 31-17 or something.
Okay.
Billy Bowman, Peyton Bowen, I believe, has been doing some punt returns and things like that. Those guys are really, really good in that. So special teams points could come into that. And, when you get a big punt return, a kick return or something, in the Red River Rivalry, that changes momentum quick. So
yeah,
I think that's an aspect that we can't look over as well.
Yeah, I was kind of getting him confused because I know Bowman does a lot of their. Billy Bowman is also a big returner for them.
Yeah.
But both safeties are
Absolutely
key parts of defense. I mean, I think the safety position just in general for them is probably their most valuable on either side of the ball. Like, I mean, Peyton Bowen, Robert Spears Jennings, Billy Bowman, they've been really, really good. And so they could impact. I think they're going to have a huge impact on this game regardless.
So do
but it's just how much is it able to get
Absolutely.
OU over the hump. But
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's see. Because 31-17, I would probably consider that a split victory if it's in that ballpark for you and Shane. But at least people that were on the show this week, you and Shane were the closest last week, with you getting the closest overall. You were pretty close. I think you had 34-17 and it was 35-13 for the Mississippi State game. So definitely a more tightly contested game than I thought. I had 52-10, so I was way off. But anyway,
well, Levy's has some experience against Texas, so I think that was the key. He kind of knew, where to pick his spots. Really good game plan. I didn't expect it to be that close and for them to hang and Texas to kind of lag and, not get the mojo running early. I think that was the big thing.
Yeah.
So it was closer than the experts thought. Mississippi State was game. They came in with a game plan, and you got to think that Levy had a few wrinkles for Texas, and that's what kind of kept him in the game.
I agree. Also, and I think he's responded well. I'm not trying to blame him or anything, but definitely those 2 Jaden Blue fumbles in the first half really kind of cost Texas there. I think they could have ended up putting that away much earlier than they did, but I thought Jaden Blue really handled that well in the press conference after the game, took responsibility. I mean, he's a junior now, so he's an upperclassman. I mean,
absolutely.
Showing that leadership now and showing that he was happy for Trey. Trey had a really big second half, and I think will continue to be a huge part. Fun little stat too that I found: Trey Wisner is second in the SEC in yards after contact, yards after catch, and avoided tackles per touch against Power 5 opponents this season. So he's he really looks a lot more elusive than I thought he did. I watched him for a couple of games when he was at DeSoto with Jonte, and I knew he was a good back, but he's really coming into his own this year.
So on that, you bring that up, I had a chance to cover those guys extensively that year. I thought that Trey Wisner was the X factor in that particular run. He seems like he got better as the year went on. You got to remember he had a couple punt returns, kick returns, his ability to get out and catch the ball. That's the thing that Texas does like to throw the ball to their running backs. And I think, I talked about this maybe a few shows back, that I thought that he would give them some really good reps in the passing game. And he's done that, and I saw him do that, when they won that first state championship. Of course, Jonte is going to get all the headlines. He does get the big ball. He does get the balls over top. But Wisner's ability to play in the slot and in the backfield for DeSoto was one big reason that they got to the state championship. And, he waited his time to get, where he is now. And, injuries sometimes play a part in that. And he's kind of fallen into his niche. And he's sticking it out, and he's performing like I thought he would if he got the opportunity. Shout out to Trey Wisner. He's one of those guys, an unsung hero type guy. And his leadership, if you pay attention to what Sark said, kind of coming into the summer, going into the fall, he did give Trey, especially he played a big role in special teams last year. If you look back at Texas last year, and when you kind of earn your stripes with that toughness, being a gunner, going down on punt, going down on kickoffs, you get the respect of your teammates. So, why not throw him a bone and give him a few carries was what they did last year. And that prepared him for his role this year. But, I think that Jared Gibson is a guy that's probably going to get some carries this week as well. Big physical back. When they get in that short yardage, goal line type situation, he's a little bit bigger guy. But I expect Jaden Blue to bounce back. You mentioned him with the fumbles and things against Mississippi State. I think that's going to be on his mind. Ball security is a thing. I'm sure Coach Choice is, hammering that point into him as well. I look for Texas to have a 100-yard rusher this week.
Yeah, that's a valid point because they haven't had one since. Well, I guess it would have been week 4, Jaden Blue against UL Monroe. Yeah, because he had that career game, 125, 4 touchdowns. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, all 3 backs have to be a huge part of the offense this weekend because some of those guys deeper down the depth chart are out. Again, he's still banged up there. So, no, and I mean, yeah, for Jared Gibson, this could be a big game too. He's running against some of his former teammates in the OU trenches at IMG Academy. Jaden Jackson up front. I don't know how much we would see David Stone, but all of them were teammates for a little bit there. I think didn't David Stone move back to Oklahoma? I don't even that's a little bit out of my memory, but I thought he moved back to Oklahoma before the start of his senior season. But they were all teammates at one point.
Absolutely.
And Jordan Johnson Bell. But
absolutely.
Yeah. But anyway, I think that's all I got. Mark, did you have anything else you wanted to add for the show?
Can't wait, man. Great game as always. Great show, man. Everybody hook 'em. Let's tune in. Let's get that win.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm super pumped for Saturday. I mean, just in general, it's a big all throughout the day. Big games. You got Oregon, Ohio State. You got obviously
Big
Texas OU. Yeah, and then night game, you got Ole Miss, LSU, in Baton Rouge. So, I think I'm missing one, but anyway, yeah, you got some huge games again this weekend. I think it's gonna be a treat after all the upsets and chaos that you had last weekend. So, anyway, yep.
All right.
Yep. For
as
Andrew Miller,
always,
Marc Henry,
hook 'em.